Cops frame black woman in court, unaware. She's a high-ranking FBI agent. In the heart of Gideon's Pass, an unsuspecting black woman stands trial for a crime she didn't commit. Everyone in the courtroom, especially a few corrupt cops, seems convinced of her guilt. They whisper her name in hushed tones, smirking at how they've manipulated evidence to make this case a slam dunk. But unbeknownst to them, their victim isn't just an ordinary defendant. She's a high-ranking FBI agent with secrets that could dismantle their entire operation. In the next few minutes, you'll witness betrayal, drama, and a surge of justice that no one saw coming. Get ready for the courtroom showdown of a lifetime. Chapter 1. First Rumblings, Approx. 800 words. Gideon's Pass was the kind of small American town that outsiders rarely noticed. Its one main street, lined with aging storefronts and a defunct movie theater, told a story of faded glory. Just beyond the city limits lay a stretch of farmland and woods that concealed generations of secrets. On the surface, everything looked ordinary, if a bit worn, but behind closed doors, alliances were being formed, and the scales of justice were being subtly bent, if not broken. The trouble began with a routine traffic stop, or so it was reported in the local paper, the Gideon Gazette. Officer Clyde Atwood, a slender man with a disarming smile, claimed he pulled over a suspicious vehicle for an expired registration sticker. It was only when he approached the driver, a composed black woman in her mid-30s, that he noticed contraband in the back seat. The official police statement was vague about the exact nature of the contraband, referring to it simply as material consistent with narcotics trafficking. Word spread quickly in Gideon's Pass. The local diner buzzed with speculation. Folks wondered who this woman was, how she'd ended up here, and whether she was truly guilty. After all, the suspicious items hadn't even been described in detail. Just contraband. If she was trafficking, where was the rest of her operation? Why was she alone? A day later, the accused woman, whose driver's license read Aisha Caldwell, was arraigned. She was well-dressed, her hair in a neat chignon, and her posture radiated quiet confidence. Standing in front of a judge known for being both fair and tough, Aisha gave nothing away. Her eyes scanned the courtroom with a certain intensity, as though she was studying each person's reactions. No one quite knew how to read her. People in Gideon's Pass typically grew flustered or defensive when found in trouble with the law. But not Aisha. She appeared calm, almost too calm, and that unsettled the local deputies. During the arraignment, prosecuting attorney Malcolm Pierce laid out the initial charges: possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. He spoke with a sharp tone, but there was a hint of hesitation in his voice, an uncertainty that something about this case wasn't adding up. The probable cause statement pointed solely to Officer Atwood's testimony and a single sealed plastic bag in plain sight behind the driver's seat. However, no official lab results had come back yet, and the defense had yet to see any physical evidence. Yet the bail was set exceptionally high. Most people would panic under such scrutiny, but Aisha remained stoic. When asked if she had an attorney, she gave a polite smile and stated she would make arrangements. The judge set the preliminary hearing for the following week. As she was led away, she glanced at the small group of onlookers, locking eyes momentarily with a man seated in the back row. He wore a crisp grey suit and sported a short beard. Their gaze held for just a second too long, enough to make the deputies wonder if they knew each other. Then he disappeared into the milling crowd, unnoticed by most. Gideon's Pass Police Department was no stranger to controversy. Rumors abounded that certain officers had ties to local crime syndicates or turned a blind eye to certain entrepreneurs. Folks whispered about arrangements, unfiled reports, and missing evidence from the station's property room. Yet no one ever came forward with proof. Fear and loyalty to the status quo held them back. Officers Clyde Atwood and his partner Dennis Reyes prided themselves on high arrest numbers. They were often praised by the local precinct for cleaning up the streets. Behind the scenes, however, there were always hushed conversations about how they managed to land so many busts. Some believed they had informants in every corner of the county. Others suspected they simply made cases up, planting evidence where it never existed. But rumors remained just that, whispers without substance. The night after Aisha's arraignment, Atwood and Reyes met at their favorite watering hole, a dimly lit bar called Rapture's Edge. Officer Atwood couldn't hide his smirk as he recounted to Reyes how smooth everything went, from the roadside search to the official statements. "She didn't even blink," he said, swirling his whiskey glass. "Can you believe it? Just sat there in front of the judge like she owned the place." Reyes snorted. Probably thought she could sweet-talk her way out of it. Atwood shrugged. "Doesn't matter. We've got the evidence, we've got the arrest, and soon enough, the lab results will confirm what we need. This is an open and shut case." The two clinked glasses, reveling in their perceived success. Neither paused to consider that they might have just kicked a hornet's nest. Neither suspected that their foolproof plan was built on shaky ground. The storm that was about to descend on Gideon's Pass would catch them entirely off guard. Across town, Aisha sat alone in the county jail, silent and watchful. Her eyes rested on the beige walls, but her mind was elsewhere, carefully assembling pieces of a larger puzzle. She reminded herself of her training at Quantico, her years working within the FBI. Keeping calm in the face of injustice was second nature. A high-ranking special agent, she'd come to Gideon's Pass with a mission. She was investigating local corruption that, according to intelligence gathered in Washington, D.C., at the J. Edgar Hoover building, extended well into the police force. She had planned to keep a low profile, to act carefully, gather evidence meticulously, and bring the corrupt to justice. Yet Officer Atwood's traffic stop had changed everything, forcing her hand far sooner than she'd anticipated. Was it bad luck, or had someone tipped him off? Was this part of a deeper conspiracy? She didn't have all the answers yet, but she did know one thing: she wasn't going down without a fight. Her role in the FBI gave her access to resources and allies that these corrupt cops had no idea existed. Her calm wasn't fear or resignation. It was the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how to dismantle a crooked system from the inside. In the solitude of her holding cell, Aisha allowed herself a small, tight smile. One wrong move on their part could very well seal their fate, and she was already a step ahead. 3 days later, Aisha stood in an interrogation room speaking to her newly appointed public defender, a fresh-faced attorney named Caroline Westfall. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the drab grey walls. Caroline, flipping through a thin stack of papers, already looked perplexed by the limited discovery provided by the prosecution. "I've never seen such a sparse set of documents for a case like this," Caroline said, glancing up at her client. "They're charging you with possession with intent to distribute, but there's no mention of the substance's weight, no lab report, nothing." Aisha simply nodded. "It's as if they're hoping to pressure me into a deal before the real facts come out," she remarked calmly. She observed Caroline carefully, trying to gauge whether the young attorney could be trusted. Though Aisha had resources well beyond a typical defendant, she needed someone on the public stage to represent her, at least for now. If Caroline proved unreliable or fell under the influence of local corruption, Aisha could easily pivot. Caroline leaned forward, lowering her voice as though the walls might have ears. "I find it really strange that the arresting officer isn't more forthcoming. In my experience, cops usually bring a mountain of evidence for a drug case. They want to appear as if they have airtight charges. But here it's all hush-hush. Makes me wonder what's really going on." Aisha allowed a small smile to touch her lips. "We'll find out soon enough." She offered no further explanation. Revealing her FBI status now might compromise her entire operation. Meanwhile, in the Gideon's Pass Police Department, tension was running high. Chief Bernard Mills, a grizzled veteran nearing retirement, was known for his bureaucratic approach to problem-solving. He rarely ventured into the field, preferring to manage from behind a desk stacked with paperwork. When he called officers Atwood and Reyes into his office, they expected a pat on the back for another successful arrest. Instead, they found the chief in a foul mood, glaring at them over his reading glasses. "What do you two think you're doing?" Chief Mills demanded, his voice low but menacing. "You arrest someone on suspicion of narcotics trafficking and can't even provide a preliminary lab report to the DA's office?" Atwood cleared his throat. "Sir, the substance was sent to the state crime lab. Delays happen. We're following procedure." Mills was unconvinced. "The local office of the district attorney just contacted me. They're under pressure from a defense attorney who's complaining about inadequate discovery. I can't have a weak case on my record. Do you understand?" Atwood tried to maintain a neutral expression, but Reyes let slip an uneasy glance. Mills caught it. "What aren't you telling me?" The chief's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Is there a chance that the so-called evidence isn't as solid as you're claiming?" Atwood stiffened. "No, sir. We have it under control. We simply need more time for the lab confirmation." Mills exhaled, leaning back in his squeaky office chair. "You better be right, because if this collapses, you'll be the ones left hanging. We're not in the business of reckless arrests." Unbeknownst to Chief Mills, the entire arrest was indeed reckless, or, more accurately, orchestrated. Atwood and Reyes had been planting evidence for months, maybe even years, to pad their arrest numbers and feed a pipeline of convictions that made the department look efficient. No one had been able to prove it so far, but Aisha's unexpected presence in Gideon's Pass was about to change that. While the chief berated his officers, Aisha received a visitor in the holding area, the man with the crisp grey suit and short beard she'd spotted at the arraignment. Deputy Marvin Glover escorted him in. Glover gave a terse nod and left them alone in an observation room, presumably to talk. The visitor was Warren Delgado, an FBI technician specializing in digital forensics. He'd been planted in the town months earlier as an accountant at the local feed store. Nobody suspected that his easy smile hid an intricate knowledge of advanced surveillance tools and infiltration tactics. "You're in pretty deep now," Delgado whispered, leaning close. "I got word from the J. Edgar Hoover building. Our superiors are concerned you've been compromised. Are you sure you want to stick this out?" Aisha met his gaze with steely resolve. "They tried to frame me. If I walk now, we lose this chance to take them down from the inside." Delgado nodded. "I've been gathering intel. The local cops on the take answer to a shadowy figure who goes by Fulton. So far, I've only got partial references, no full name. But there's money exchanging hands, lots of it." "Any idea if Fulton has ties higher up?" Aisha asked. Delgado shook his head. "Not yet. But I suspect whoever Fulton is, he's got local business owners and possibly politicians in his pocket. This isn't just a few dirty cops. It could be a network. If we blow your cover, we might never get to the top." Aisha's expression remained steady. "That's why we proceed carefully. Let them think they have me cornered. Meanwhile, gather as much evidence as you can. Audio, video, financial records, anything. If the local police are deeply involved, we need airtight proof." Delgado slipped a small device into her hand, a covert listening bug. "In case they transfer you to another cell, or if you get a chance to place it somewhere strategic, be careful." They parted ways with a silent nod, the fate of the investigation weighing heavily in the room. Later that day, Officer Reyes found himself uneasy. He couldn't quite explain why. Maybe the intensity of Chief Mills's glare still haunted him. He rummaged through his desk, searching for the file on Aisha Caldwell, cursing himself for not having more complete paperwork. The statements were thin, the evidence logs incomplete. The entire bust had been orchestrated so quickly that he feared they'd left loose ends. He remembered the initial tip that led them to target Aisha's car, an anonymous call describing a black woman with suspicious cargo. Reyes had been suspicious at first, but Atwood convinced him it was a golden opportunity. Now he questioned whether the call had been a setup. Maybe someone had manipulated them. He thought about the rumor that an undercover FBI agent was sniffing around Gideon's Pass, a rumor that had circulated among the local criminals. But Reyes dismissed it. After all, if this woman were an FBI plant, she would have tried to avoid being caught, right? While Reyes tried to quell his growing sense of dread, Aisha prepared for the next phase of her silent war against corruption. She would use the upcoming preliminary hearing to draw out inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. With each misstep by Atwood, Reyes, and anyone else involved, she'd tighten the noose on their operation. She knew she had to move methodically, revealing her hand only when the time was right. Darkness fell over Gideon's Pass, but for many, sleep did not come easily. Aisha lay awake on a stiff cot, replaying every detail she'd gathered. Could it really be just these two officers, or was there a deeper current? Meanwhile, Atwood and Reyes tossed and turned in their beds, grappling with the nagging feeling that something was amiss. And in the hush of midnight, Delgado pored over financial ledgers, cross-referencing suspicious transactions. Unbeknownst to all of them, larger forces were at play. Quiet phone calls were being made to local officials trying to sway the case. People with big pockets and bigger ambitions were planning their next moves. But none suspected that the woman they had framed was not just any defendant. She was the scythe, and soon she would swing, cutting away the rot from Gideon's Pass once and for all. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived, and a tense hush fell over the Gideon's Pass courthouse. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating motes of dust floating lazily in the air. Locals, curious to see the high-stakes proceedings, crowded the back rows. Word of the case had spread, and people were hungry for any hint of scandal or drama. Aisha stood beside Caroline Westfall, looking poised and self-possessed. Across from them, at the prosecution's table, sat Malcolm Pierce, the assistant district attorney, rifling through his notes, occasionally shooting glances at Aisha. He, like so many, was unnerved by her composure. Cases like these usually featured frantic defendants, not measured calm. Judge Anita Pollard, a middle-aged woman known for her unwavering commitment to judicial integrity, called the hearing to order. "We're here for a probable cause determination in the matter of the state versus..." "Caldwell, are both sides ready?" Pierce rose, clearing his throat. "Yes, Your Honor." Caroline nodded. "Ready, Your Honor." Pierce began with a straightforward recap of Officer Atwood's arrest report. He described how Aisha's car was stopped for an expired registration and that Officer Atwood observed, in plain view, a small bag containing a suspicious substance. According to him, the field test indicated it was a controlled substance. However, he glossed over what type of substance or the exact test that had been used. Caroline stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have yet to receive any lab results confirming the alleged substance. The defense requests that this hearing be postponed until the prosecution can provide concrete evidence." Judge Pollard turned to Pierce. "Mr. Pierce, what is the status of the lab report?" Pierce's features tightened. "We've encountered some delays at the State Crime Lab. However, we do have Officer Atwood's field test, which is typically enough to establish probable cause at this stage." Caroline persisted. "Officer Atwood's field test alone is hardly reliable, especially in light of the fact that the field test's brand or accuracy haven't been detailed. Additionally, the defense has reason to believe that there may be discrepancies in the chain of custody." Pierce shot up in his seat. "Objection, Your Honor. The defense is speculating." But Caroline pressed on. "Let's hear from Officer Atwood himself, shall we? He should be here to testify today." Officer Atwood took the stand, smoothing the front of his uniform. He was confident, perhaps overly so, as he recounted how he smelled a distinct chemical odor and saw the suspicious bag in plain sight. His smarmy charm was on full display as he described in detail the procedure of the stop, the supposed probable cause, and the arrest. Caroline grilled him with precise questions. "You mentioned a distinct odor. Can you describe it more specifically? Atwood hesitated. It was a chemical smell, like cleaning supplies. He sounded uncertain, fumbling. Caroline's eyebrow arched. Interesting. So you immediately suspected the substance was illegal drugs because it smelled like cleaning products? Well, Atwood mumbled, field tests can sometimes come back positive for substances that have similar chemical compositions. So you're not entirely sure you identified the smell as narcotics, correct? Caroline interjected before turning to the judge. I'd like to point out how vague that is. There's no specialized drug detection training listed in Officer Atwood's file that we're aware of, and no canine unit was called to confirm. Pierce tried to object again, but Judge Pollard waved him off, clearly annoyed. Let the defense continue. Caroline then introduced a piece of evidence of her own. We've obtained a copy of the dashcam footage from Officer Atwood's cruiser. She handed a flash drive to the court clerk, who handed it to the judge. We request it be admitted into evidence. With the footage playing on a monitor, the courtroom watched the traffic stop unfold. Aisha's car pulled over. Atwood approached the driver's side. The audio was garbled, but the exchange seemed polite. Then, at a specific moment, Atwood stepped back from the car, turned slightly away from the dashcam's view, and the bag in question suddenly appeared in his hand. It wasn't definitive proof of planting evidence, but it looked suspicious. The angle was off, as if Atwood might have been hiding something from the camera's lens. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Aisha kept her face neutral, but Caroline shot her a furtive look of triumph. She'd found the dashcam footage through a routine discovery request, never suspecting it would be so revealing. Atwood tried to dismiss the footage as a bad camera angle, insisting the bag was already on the seat. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted in Judge Pollard's mind. Mr. Pierce, the judge said, looking over the rim of her glasses, I'm going to need to see the official crime lab results before deciding on probable cause. I'll give you 1 week to produce them. If you don't have conclusive proof by then, I'll have to seriously reconsider whether this case should proceed. As the hearing adjourned, the gallery erupted in hushed whispers. Atwood's face was flush with anger. Aisha, escorted out by a bailiff, locked eyes with Atwood. The contempt in his glare was undeniable. She had bested him in the preliminary hearing, and it stung. Outside, an outraged Atwood confronted Pierce. You were supposed to handle this, Pierce responded in a low voice. You gave me nothing to work with. Don't you dare pin this on me. The tension between them was palpable. While this confrontation simmered, Delgado watched from across the corridor, feigning disinterest. He listened carefully, capturing every snippet of conversation for his field notes. Already, the case was beginning to crack. Later that afternoon, Caroline visited Aisha at the jail. She seemed more confident than before, carrying a stack of papers. After that display in court, I'm pretty hopeful. But I have to ask, are you sure there isn't more you'd like to tell me? Aisha considered how much she could safely reveal. She liked Caroline's tenacity, but trust was something she granted sparingly. Finally she said, I'm not just some random person, Caroline. I have resources, and I'm working with people who can help. When the time is right, everything will come to light. Caroline studied her closely. You sound very sure of yourself. Aisha simply smiled. I am. Meanwhile, in another part of Gideon's Pass, Reyes hovered near a telephone in a cramped evidence room. His heart pounded as he dialed a number scrawled on a slip of paper. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered, Yeah? It's done, Reyes said, his voice trembling. I don't know how she pulled that dashcam footage, but it's making Atwood look bad. We need more help, maybe from higher up. The gruff voice replied, Keep your mouth shut, Reyes. Fulton is aware of the situation. You just make sure not to screw up any further. Reyes hung up, anxiety racking his mind. He felt trapped, entangled in a web of corruption that was closing in on him. He remembered rumors of an FBI agent in town, a rumor he had laughed off. But now the thought haunted him. What if this woman was that agent? What if their entire operation was about to be blown wide open? Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Gideon's Pass. The town was holding its breath, poised between illusions of law and order, and the creeping truth that something far darker thrived beneath the surface. Aisha sensed the tension in the air even behind bars. She knew the moment of revelation was drawing closer. She could almost taste it. And when that moment came, Gideon's Pass would never be the same. The Gideon's Pass County Jail was typically silent after lights out, save for the distant hum of generators and the occasional muffled conversation. That night, however, was different. Aisha lay on her narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, when she sensed movement in the corridor. Footsteps, deliberate, slow. Instinct from years of FBI fieldwork made her sit up, fully alert. A guard she recognized as Johnson, a stocky man with a perpetual sneer, unlocked her cell door. Behind him stood Officer Clyde Atwood. Aisha's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Atwood motioned for her to stand. "We have a transfer order. Something about overcrowding. You're being moved to a holding cell at the next county over." Aisha's stomach churned with suspicion. This was too convenient, happening late at night. "I wasn't informed of any hearing about this. My attorney—" "Doesn't matter," Atwood barked, stepping in. "You're coming with us." She briefly contemplated her options. If she resisted now, she risked blowing her cover. She'd come too far to compromise her objective. So she nodded, allowing the cuffs to be placed around her wrists. Johnson led her down a dimly lit hallway, past rows of cells, and into a loading area behind the jail. A single van waited. Atwood climbed in behind the wheel, while Johnson shoved her into the back. The van's interior smelled of old vinyl and stale coffee. Through a small metal grill, she watched as Atwood stared at her in the rearview mirror with a predatory gleam. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle rumbled to life. They drove for nearly half an hour, passing from paved roads to bumpy gravel lanes. Aisha recognized none of the surroundings. This wasn't the route to the next county's jail. Anxiety twisted her gut, but she forced herself to remain calm. Inside the waistband of her loose-fitting jail scrubs, hidden in a small sewn pocket, was the covert listening bug Delgado had given her. She'd already recorded the sounds of Atwood forcing her out of her cell. Now, she carefully pressed a finger against the bug, activating its transmitter mode, hoping Delgado or someone at the bureau was monitoring her feed. Eventually, the van rattled to a stop near an abandoned barn, silhouetted by moonlight. Atwood got out first, scanning the area. Johnson yanked the door open, dragging Aisha out. The night air was cold, prickling her skin. Crickets chirped and tall grass rustled ominously. Atwood opened the barn's creaking doors. Inside was darkness, broken only by thin beams of moonlight streaming through warped planks. He turned to Johnson. "You make sure no one's around. We don't want any surprises." Johnson circled the barn, shining a flashlight around the perimeter. Meanwhile, Atwood shoved Aisha forward. "You thought you were smart in that courtroom, huh? Making me look like a liar?" Aisha's heart thudded, but she kept her tone calm. "I've done nothing but maintain my innocence." "Oh, cut the act," Atwood sneered. "I know you're up to something. You come into my town and think you can walk away free after humiliating me? Not a chance." She realized he might be on the edge of panic or rage, dangerous in either case. She braced herself for the possibility of violence. "It seems I struck a nerve," she said softly. He grabbed her by the collar of her scrubs, eyes blazing. "Let's just say we have a special way of dealing with problems out here, ones that talk too much or dig too deep." He let go, sending her stumbling back. Johnson returned from his perimeter check, giving a curt nod. "All clear." Atwood dug into his pocket, pulling out a small bag of a white substance. He waved it in front of her face. "You see this? This will be our excuse. Claimed you tried to escape. We found you with more dope on you. We had no choice but to put you down." The unspoken meaning hung thick in the air. Aisha's mind raced. If they'd brought her here, they intended to make sure she never saw a courtroom again. She had to buy time. "Why risk it?" she asked, her voice steady. "You could just wait for the lab report, if you're so sure I'm guilty." Atwood let out a bitter laugh. "We can't have you messing up more of our business. We've got bigger fish to fry, sweetheart." He turned to Johnson. "Get the camera from the van. Let's stage this scene the way we planned." The plan was chillingly clear. They would fabricate evidence of a violent altercation, claim Aisha attacked them, and justify lethal force. She needed to act. Aisha's adrenaline surged, training kicking in. She knew how to disarm an opponent, even in handcuffs, but Atwood and Johnson were armed. One false move, and she might get shot. She searched for a split-second opportunity. Johnson was rummaging in the van, leaving Atwood alone with her. Though Atwood had a weapon holstered at his side, he seemed overconfident. Aisha braced herself, calculating. Then she heard it, an engine roaring in the distance. All three of them looked toward the barn entrance as headlights cut through the darkness. A black SUV skidded to a halt. Two figures jumped out, flashlights slicing through the night. Aisha recognized one instantly, Warren Delgado. Atwood cursed under his breath, fumbling for his gun. Delgado shouted, "FBI! Drop your weapons!" As he and the second figure, an FBI field agent named Clarissa Rowe, charged toward them. Aisha seized the moment, pivoting on her left foot and swinging her cuffed hands upward. She struck Atwood's forearm, causing him to drop his gun with a startled yelp. The gun clattered on the barn's dirt floor, and she kicked it away. Delgado reached her side just as Johnson reappeared, brandishing his sidearm. Rowe leveled her firearm at Johnson, yelling, "Drop it!" Johnson, his face twisted in panic, released his weapon. The clang of metal against the barn floor echoed in the silent night. Atwood, disoriented and furious, tried to lunge for his dropped gun, but Delgado was faster, tackling him to the ground. The entire exchange happened in seconds, leaving both crooked officers cuffed and panting in the dust. Aisha's pulse pounded in her ears, but relief flooded her. "You got here just in time," she breathed. Delgado nodded, helping her to her feet. "We were monitoring your feed. Figured something was off when we heard you getting transferred late at night with no paperwork." Rowe pulled out her radio. "We've got 2 suspects in custody," she said into it. "Request immediate backup at the old Miller barn outside Gideon's Pass." Atwood spat onto the ground. "Your FBI?" His gaze flicked between Aisha and Delgado, equal parts rage and confusion contorting his features. "But you were in jail, for God's sake." Aisha stood tall, the moonlight catching the determination in her eyes. "You picked the wrong person to frame." She turned to Delgado. "We need to secure that bag of powder he tried to plant." Rowe collected it as evidence, double-bagging it carefully. "We'll have the lab run it independently. This should blow their entire operation wide open." Off in the distance, sirens wailed. Aisha felt a weight lift off her chest, yet she knew this was only the beginning. Atwood and Johnson were cogs in a much larger machine, and as the FBI poured into Gideon's Pass, more dominoes would fall. She would ensure that the entire corrupt network, including the elusive Fulton, came crashing down. But for now, she permitted herself a moment of quiet triumph. Standing in that dusty barn, handcuffed but unbroken, Aisha Caldwell had turned the tables, and the consequences for those who had tried to destroy her were only just beginning. 2 hours later, dawn tinted the sky with faint oranges and purples. The dilapidated barn was now a bustling crime scene, flooded with FBI agents, county deputies, and even Chief Mills, who was red-faced and sputtering. Patrol cars and black SUVs lined the dirt road leading to the barn. Under the flashing lights, Officer Atwood and Guard Johnson had been escorted to separate vehicles. Their eyes darted around, realizing their meltdown was now on full display. Aisha stood at the periphery with Delgado and Clarissa Rowe, her hands finally freed from the cuffs. She rubbed her wrists, feeling pins and needles. Rowe offered her a bottle of water. "You sure you're all right?" Aisha took a sip, nodding. Just a bit sore, but I'll manage. She glanced around, taking in the scale of the FBI presence. I didn't expect you to bring the cavalry. Delgado shrugged. We got the green light from higher-ups as soon as it was clear your life was in danger. We'd been tailing you via your transmitter once we sensed something was off. And you were right. Atwood was about to do something drastic. Chief Mills approached, face tight. His expression was a mix of disbelief and indignation. Agent Caldwell, if that's your real name, care to explain why half the FBI is descending on my town? Aisha studied him carefully. I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, she confirmed, pulling a folded document from her pocket that identified her covert role. I've been investigating police corruption in Gideon's Pass for several months. After we uncovered credible evidence that Officer Atwood and others were involved in framing civilians and planting narcotics to inflate arrest statistics, we went undercover to collect more concrete proof. Mills bristled. You went undercover as a defendant in my jurisdiction, without notifying me. That was part of the operation, Aisha explained calmly. We had reason to believe that the corruption went beyond just a few officers. We couldn't risk tipping off the wrong people. If that includes you, Chief, you'll have your chance to defend yourself. Mills's face paled, but he blustered on. I'm no crook. I've worked in law enforcement for over 30 years. Aisha's gaze softened slightly. Then we'll find that out as we investigate. She turned away, leaving Mills standing there, sputtering. Around them, forensic teams snapped photographs and bagged evidence. The battered wooden barn had become a goldmine of potential proof. Footprints, bullet casings from previous incidents, and remnants of suspicious substances hidden away in corners. One FBI tech exclaimed they'd found a stash of illegal firearms behind some rotting hay bales. The scope of wrongdoing was expanding by the minute. After ensuring the scene was secure, Aisha joined Delgado and Rowe in the back of a black SUV. The adrenaline had begun to fade, replaced by a somber resolve. This is only the first layer, she said, voice steady. Atwood and Johnson are just the tip of the iceberg. We have to figure out who Fulton is and how deep his influence runs. Delgado flipped open a laptop, accessing a secure database. We have the communications logs from Reyes's phone. We also have flagged bank transactions from someone calling themselves Fulton, but we haven't pinpointed his real identity yet. Rowe leaned in. I've cross-referenced property records in Gideon's Pass. A local businessman named Oliver Fulton owns multiple establishments around here, but so far none of them show direct ties to the police. We need more than a hunch. Aisha nodded. We'll run a thorough background check. If he's the same Fulton paying off officers to do his dirty work, we'll find a money trail. Soon, a deputy approached the SUV, lightly tapping the window. Agent Caldwell, there's someone here to see you. Stepping out, she found Caroline Westfall, looking both relieved and shell-shocked. I just heard what happened, Caroline said, eyes flicking over the FBI vehicles. You're an FBI agent, Aisha finished for her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. You handled my defense brilliantly, Caroline. You stood up for me in court, which helped us bring this case into the light. Caroline shook her head in disbelief. I had no idea. I just kept thinking something about your case didn't add up. And then this happens. She took a breath. I guess my job as your attorney is done, unless you plan on pressing charges against the police department. Aisha placed a reassuring hand on Caroline's shoulder. Your representation has been invaluable. I'd love for you to remain involved if it comes to civil suits or other legal avenues. There might be many innocent people framed by these officers who'll need help too. A flash of determination lit Caroline's face. I'm in. This town deserves better. People deserve justice. Before they could continue, they noticed a commotion near the barn. A cluster of FBI agents escorted Officer Reyes into a squad car. He looked pale, clammy. He locked eyes with Aisha for a moment. Something about that stare suggested regret rather than anger. Rose stepped over, shaking her head. We questioned Reyes. He claims he was coerced by Atwood and others to participate in these frame-ups. Says someone named Fulton threatened him and his family if he didn't comply. Aisha's thoughts swirled. Reyes might be a key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. Did he mention any details that point directly to Oliver Fulton, the businessman? Not yet, Rowe replied, but he's agreed to a full debrief in exchange for leniency. He sounds terrified. Aisha exhaled. We might finally get some real answers. She glanced at Delgado. Let's set up an interrogation ASAP. While morning sunlight fully illuminated Gideon's Pass, news crews began to arrive, spurred by tips about major police corruption arrests. Reporters hovered outside the barn's perimeter, cameras rolling. The name of the once sleepy town was about to make headlines, and Aisha was at the center of it. She found a moment of quiet near a squad car, gazing out at the farmland that rolled into the distance. She recalled the day she first arrived in Gideon's Pass, disguised as a traveler passing through, never expecting to be handcuffed and thrown into a cell. Her assignment had been to expose wrongdoing, and while it had escalated into something life-threatening, she had succeeded in tearing the veil off a sinister network. But she also knew the fight wasn't over. Clyde Atwood's wide-eyed fury, Officer Reyes's fear, Fulton's hidden manipulations. These were all threads of a larger tapestry of corruption. Aisha vowed to see it through to the end. She would free innocent people who had been framed, dismantle the money-laundering pipelines, and hold every conspirator accountable. She watched as the FBI loaded Atwood into a black SUV bound for a federal facility. He glared at her through the window, a silent promise of revenge or regret. She couldn't tell which. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Part of her pitied him, another tragic figure lost to ambition and greed. But the greater part of her felt a fierce satisfaction. Justice was taking its course. For once, Gideon's Pass stood at a crossroads. The illusions were falling away, replaced by the stark possibility of redemption. With the corrupt being rooted out, maybe the town had a chance at genuine renewal. Aisha let the thought settle in her mind like a welcome sunrise. The aftershocks of this night would reverberate for a long time, but she would guide the tremors toward a better tomorrow. The Gideon's Pass Police Department building was unusually silent. Dispatchers eyed FBI agents nervously as they combed through records, seizing documents and computer files. All around, anxious officers watched the takedown of their colleagues, uncertain who might be next. Some whispered about retirement. Others tried to justify looking the other way. The tension was palpable, as though a single pin drop could shatter what was left of their fragile sense of normalcy. In a small interrogation room, the fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows on Officer Dennis Reyes's strained face. He sat across from Aisha Caldwell and Warren Delgado, fiddling with the hem of his uniform jacket. The presence of an FBI videotaping unit made him visibly uneasy. Aisha leaned forward, her voice measured. "Officer Reyes, you told us you want leniency in exchange for cooperation. That only works if you give us actionable intel. Who is Fulton?" Reyes swallowed hard. I only met him once in person. He wore a suit, called himself Oliver Fulton. He runs the local trucking company, Fulton Freight. But I heard rumors he's involved in more than just legitimate shipping, drugs, guns, you name it. He pays off cops to keep his routes clear, to plant evidence on competition or anyone who crosses him. Delgado took notes. Why'd you go along with it? Reyes exhaled shakily. At first it was just pressure from Atwood. He said if I didn't help, I'd lose my job. Then I started getting threats in the mail, pictures of my kids, notes telling me to keep in line. When I tried to quit, Atwood said Fulton's men would come after my family. Aisha exchanged a glance with Delgado. They'd long suspected someone in Gideon's Pass was orchestrating a network of criminal activity. Now they had a name, an industry, a direct link. So Fulton is the puppet master, pulling strings in the police department. Reyes nodded vigorously. He has his hands in everything. Chief Mills never openly took bribes, at least not that I saw, but he definitely looked the other way more than once. Aisha slid a photo across the table, a grainy shot of Oliver Fulton stepping into a black sedan. "Is this him?" Reyes flicked a glance and nodded. "That's the man." Delgado leaned in. "So how do we get him?" "We need more than just your testimony." Reyes swallowed again, eyes downcast. "He records some of his meetings at the Fulton Freight warehouse near the rail yard. I heard he keeps blackmail on people there. Documents, videos, everything. It's like his insurance policy." Aisha's pulse quickened. If they could obtain that trove of blackmail and financial records, it might topple the entire network. "All right, here's what's going to happen. You'll assist us in staging an undercover approach. We'll get a warrant, but we need you to make contact with Fulton, set up a meeting so we can gather incriminating evidence. If you cooperate fully and truthfully, we'll advocate for reduced charges." Reyes's eyes brimmed with anxiety and relief. Yes, I'll do whatever you say." Aisha rose from her chair, Delgado following suit. "You do your part, Officer Reyes, and we'll do ours." Within hours, the FBI had mobilized an operation. They secured a warrant to search Fulton Freight, but as was often the case with high-value targets, they wanted to catch Fulton red-handed. Under supervision, Reyes placed a call. "Mr. Fulton, we need to talk about the Caldwell situation," he said, voice tremulous. "Yeah, I know the FBI is sniffing around. I got spooked. I'm at the end of my rope." He paused, listening. "Tonight. At the warehouse? All right." He hung up, turning to the FBI agents. "He wants to meet in 3 hours." Meanwhile, Aisha coordinated a tactical team. She stood in a briefing room with half a dozen special agents, including Clarissa Rowe, Delgado, and a SWAT element from the regional FBI office. Maps of the warehouse interior were pinned to a whiteboard, and a screen displayed real-time satellite imagery, courtesy of the Bureau's resources. "We have reason to believe Fulton's keeping incriminating files in his main office, located on the 2nd floor, Aisha explained, gesturing to the map. "He also runs an illicit side operation that may involve narcotics and illegal arms shipments. We'll execute the search warrant once Reyes signals that Fulton is on site and the transaction or meeting is underway. Our priority is to seize those records before Fulton can destroy them." Clarissa Rowe stepped forward. "We'll have 2 teams. Team A enters discreetly from the east loading dock. Team B secures the perimeter, ensuring no one escapes. Agent Caldwell and I will coordinate from the mobile command post in constant communication with Reyes, who'll be wearing a wire." At the appointed time, dusk fell across Gideon's Pass. The Fulton Freight warehouse was an imposing structure of corrugated metal with towering stacks of shipping containers around the yard. Floodlights cast harsh cones of light over a handful of trucks. The faint rumble of a passing freight train rattled the ground. A black sedan arrived, out of which stepped Oliver Fulton, a tall man with slicked-back salt-and-pepper hair, wearing an expensive tailored suit. His cold gaze surveyed the area before he strode inside. Minutes later, Reyes arrived in his patrol car, a wire taped beneath his shirt. He entered the warehouse, anxiously greeting Fulton. From the FBI command post in a discreet van nearby, Aisha and Rowe listened through Reyes's mic. The wire crackled with echoing footsteps on concrete. Fulton's voice was calm, almost casual. "You said you have concerns, Reyes. So talk." Reyes stammered. "The Caldwell arrest. It's blowing up. They found out we planted evidence. Atwood's arrested too. I can't do this anymore. The FBI is breathing down my neck." Fulton's tone turned lethal. "You think you can just walk away? Are you forgetting who pays your bills?" A chilling pause. "I'd hate for something to happen to your family." Aisha watched Rowe's face tighten in anger. "That's enough," Aisha whispered into her comm, giving the green light to the tactical teams. "Move in." Suddenly the wire transmission caught a rustling sound, like Fulton lunging at Reyes. "Don't you dare record me," Fulton barked, presumably discovering the wire. "You traitorous—" A deafening crash echoed through the feed as SWAT agents breached the side door. Shouts filled the air. "FBI! Hands up!" Gunfire erupted, 2 shots that reverberated through the metal structure. Aisha gripped her headphones, heart pounding. "Officer down?" she called into the microphone. Rowe, also listening, shook her head at the second feed. No, that was directed at the ceiling. Fulton's men must be firing warning shots. In real time on the monitors, Team A advanced through the warehouse, methodically clearing each corner. Agents pinned down 2 armed men near a forklift. Another team headed upstairs to Fulton's office. Reyes had taken cover behind a stack of crates, hands up, calling out to the approaching SWAT officers. Through the wire, they heard him yell, "I'm unarmed! Don't shoot!" Fulton, however, was nowhere in sight, having slipped into a side corridor. The chase was on. Agents fanned out to corner him. Moments later, Delgado's voice crackled over the radio. "I have eyes on Fulton, East Corridor, 2nd floor. He's armed, brandishing a pistol." Aisha's breath caught. If Fulton shot Delgado or any FBI agent, this could turn into a lethal standoff. She dreaded a violent ending, but knew they had to contain the threat. Rowe calmly relayed instructions to the tactical team. "Secure the area. Attempt to negotiate if possible, but do not let him escape." Then, over the feed, Delgado's voice rose. "Drop your weapon, Fulton." "It's over." Silence. A tense pause stretched, thick as tar. Then the clatter of a gun hitting the ground. "Don't shoot!" Fulton's voice trembling with fear or frustration. By the time they led Fulton out in handcuffs, Team B had secured the entire warehouse. Agents discovered a locked steel cabinet in Fulton's office containing incriminating files. Bank statements showing payments to officers Atwood, Reyes and others. Ledgers detailing illegal arms shipments and narcotics distribution, and video recordings that presumably documented blackmail material on local officials. Fulton's empire had been laid bare. Aisha arrived inside the warehouse after the scene was declared safe, stepping over scattered crates and passing the lines of subdued henchmen. She spotted Fulton, head bowed, flanked by agents. Their eyes met, and in that moment she saw fury and a tinge of something else. Fear. He muttered curses under his breath. Delgado approached, holding a USB flash drive. "This contains every shred of blackmail Fulton had on people. If half of it's true, we'll be arresting a lot more folks in Gideon's Pass." Aisha nodded, surveying the expanse of seized evidence. "Then we'll clean up this town for good." Reyes, pale and shaken, stood nearby, flanked by an agent. Aisha paused to meet his gaze. "You did the right thing." He merely nodded, eyes haunted. "I should have come forward sooner." She offered no platitude. Guilt was his to bear, but at least he'd taken a step toward redemption. With Fulton in custody, the puppet strings that bound Gideon's Pass had finally been severed. In the days following Oliver Fulton's arrest, Gideon's Pass became a hotbed of federal activity. News vans lined the courthouse steps, and every major outlet clamored for interviews. Headlines in the Gideon Gazette screamed, "FBI sting uncovers massive police corruption. Local business tycoon Oliver Fulton in custody." Townsfolk spoke of little else in the diner, the post office, and the barber shop. It was as if the entire community was waking from a dark collective dream, horrified by the reality they'd blindly accepted. At least a dozen more officers were placed on administrative leave under suspicion of collusion, while some willingly resigned. Chief Mills held a tense press conference to address the public. With shaking hands, he insisted he knew nothing about Fulton's bribery schemes, but apologized profusely for any negligence on his part. Investigations into his leadership continued. Many suspected his silence for all those years was not entirely innocent. Meanwhile, Aisha and an FBI task force combed through the trove of records seized at Fulton Freight. Each new file revealed more layers of corruption: local businessmen who paid protection money, politicians who received campaign contributions in exchange for favors, and even a judge from a neighboring county who quashed certain cases at Fulton's behest. The scope was staggering, and federal indictments were soon to follow. One morning, as Aisha sat at a temporary FBI workstation set up in the Gideon's Pass Municipal Building, she received an unexpected visitor, Caroline Westfall. The young attorney approached with a cautious smile. "Heard about the arrests? Looks like you've blown this town wide open." Aisha rose and smiled back. "Couldn't have done it without you pushing in court. Your relentless defense forced them to scramble, and that exposed their weak links." Caroline looked both proud and uncertain. "So what happens now?" Aisha paused, glancing around the makeshift office buzzing with activity. "There'll be trials, lots of them. People who were framed will have their convictions overturned. Civil suits may be filed. Gideon's Pass will have to reckon with its past, but it also means a chance to start fresh." Caroline nodded. "I've been approached by several families who believe their loved ones were wrongfully convicted under Atwood and Reyes. I'm thinking of taking on their cases, even forming a coalition if we need to." Aisha offered her hand, and Caroline shook it. "You'll do great work. Reach out if you need anything." That evening, Aisha found herself on the steps of the courthouse, gazing at the sunset. The gold and crimson hues reminded her of the countless nights she'd spent away from home, chasing leads, living under cover. It was a solitary life sometimes, but moments like this made it worthwhile. Justice had been served, not perfectly, not without pain, but enough to believe in change. A familiar voice sounded behind her. "Bit for your thoughts?" It was Delgado, looking tired but satisfied. She turned, lips curving into a grin. "Just thinking about how one traffic stop turned into the biggest corruption case this town has ever seen, and how it almost ended my career and my life." Delgado nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Good thing you're stubborn. You never let them break you." Aisha shrugged, a hint of wry humor in her eyes. "Guess that's why the Bureau keeps me around." They both laughed softly. Then Delgado's face turned serious. "You'll be heading back to D.C. soon, right?" Aisha stared at the horizon. "Eventually, but not before I tie up loose ends." She glanced at Delgado. "And you?" "Another assignment, probably," Delgado said with a sigh. "But I'm glad we got the job done here. Gideon's Pass might have a shot at real honesty now." The next week saw a flurry of hearings. Atwood and Johnson were arraigned, indicted for conspiracy, assault, and multiple counts of evidence tampering. Oliver Fulton was charged with racketeering, bribery, narcotics trafficking, and more. In court, his once suave demeanor gave way to barely contained rage as prosecutors laid out a mountain of evidence. Officer Reyes testified, detailing every dirty deed he witnessed. He was placed under protective custody for fear of retribution from Fulton's remaining associates. Finally, it was time for Aisha to step onto the national stage. The FBI scheduled a press conference. Rows of microphones bristled from a podium set on the courthouse lawn. The media presence was overwhelming, cameras flashing and reporters jostling for position. Aisha approached the podium in a crisp navy suit, flanked by senior FBI officials. She took a moment to steady herself, scanning the crowd. Then she spoke, voice clear. "Over the past several months, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has conducted a thorough investigation into allegations of corruption within the Gideon's Pass Police Department and local businesses associated with Mr. Oliver Fulton. Our efforts, combined with invaluable help from dedicated individuals in this community, have led to significant arrests and the dismantling of a network that preyed upon citizens' trust. Let it be known that no one is above the law, and the FBI will continue to pursue justice wherever corruption may be found." The crowd erupted in questions, but Aisha kept her answers concise, mindful of ongoing legal proceedings. When she finished, applause mingled with the clamor of reporters. She stepped down, a swirl of relief and pride filling her chest. Later that day, she walked through the main street of Gideon's Pass, noticing subtle changes. The once reckless sense of oppression seemed lifted. Locals smiled more openly, greeted each other without the usual hushed caution. She even stopped by the local diner, ordering a cup of coffee. The waitress recognized her from the news and offered it on the house. "Thank you," was all the woman said, a tremor of gratitude in her voice. As night fell, Aisha prepared to leave town, her car packed. She'd be back for the trials, but for now, her part here was done. She placed a final call to Caroline Westfall, wishing her luck. "You know where to find me if you need me," Aisha said. Caroline's excited voice on the other end was the last comforting sound Aisha heard before she ended the call. Outside, Delgado waited beside an FBI-issued sedan, trunk open for her bag. He gave her a half-smile. "Ready?" She nodded, tossing her duffel inside. "Let's go." They drove away from Gideon's Pass under a moonlit sky, the road stretching long and empty. As the lights of the town faded behind them, Aisha felt an unexpected pang of affection for this battered place. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it had learned a hard lesson about truth and accountability. Perhaps that was how real growth began. In a few hours, she'd be on a flight back to Washington, D.C., back to the J. Edgar Hoover building to file endless reports and prepare for the next mission. But a part of her would remain here in Gideon's Pass, where a band of corrupt cops once thought they could destroy a seemingly helpless black woman in a rigged courtroom, only to discover too late that they'd cornered the wrong target. She was no mere defendant. She was an FBI agent, trained and ready to fight back, and fight back she had. The scales of justice, once so heavily tilted, now stood closer to balance, in no small part because of her resolve. And somewhere, in some small town, someone else might be plotting to abuse power. But Aisha Caldwell would be ready for them too, whenever her phone rang with the next assignment. That was the legacy she carried, the duty she embraced. And that, dear viewers, concludes the shocking saga of a so-called open and shut case that turned out to be a powder keg of corruption, until a high-ranking FBI agent, framed for a crime she never committed, decided to flip the entire system on its head. Gideon's Pass will never be the same, and neither will those who dared to abuse their badges. Justice has been served, and we were there every step of the way to witness it. If you enjoyed this high-stakes drama, complete with twists, turns, and ultimate karma, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with friends who love a suspenseful story. And if you want more powerful tales of justice served and secrets unveiled, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Until next time, keep seeking the truth. And remember, sometimes the biggest surprises come in the unlikeliest places.